in our first lecture. So today's lecture really deals with the fact that the Europeans really had no clue that America was here. Pass those out, please. Okay, and so we were really quite a surprise to the Europeans. That's why it says topic 1, the American surprise. Pass those out, please. Okay, you've got to put yourself into the mindset of somebody who lives in Europe in the year 1491. They know about Europe. They know about Africa. They know about Asia. They don't know about anything else. So you have to understand how much of a surprise it was when they found that we were here, okay? Which is why topic 1 and our first lecture deals with the American surprise. As we go through, you are going to want to keep on your desk the 2 sheets that are being passed out to you, okay? We will fill out the pivotal events chart together. So as we go through class, as we go through the lecture, as we go through topics 1 and 2, we will fill that chart out with each other, okay? The explorer's chart, the Age of Exploration chart, you'll fill out on your own. Both of these, though, you get to use on your test, okay? So you are going to want to fill them out. You don't get to add anything else to them, but given the fact that I'm letting you use them on your tests, you're probably going to want to put in the work to make sure that they are completed as they stand, okay? So just leave these on your desks right now, and then when we get to them, when we get to a slide that says fill it in, we'll fill it in together. All right. Most of our lectures will begin, as this one does, with some key questions, okay? So these are ideas that by the end of the lecture, you should be able to answer. I'm not asking these questions for you right now so that you can raise your hand and tell me, because you're probably going to be wrong, and that's okay, all right? But by the end of the lecture, we should be able to answer these. So if you're taking notes on pencil and paper, write it down and then maybe leave a space or two for each of these so that you can go back and respond to it, okay? But our first key question for this lecture is, why did Europeans want, or in some cases really need, to find new paths? And the question is, new paths where? We'll get to that, okay? But why did Europeans want, or in certain cases need, to find new paths? That's the first key question we'll address. The second one is then, who were those Europeans that went out on those new paths? So who were the first major European explorers, and when did they explore? Okay, so who were the first explorers, and when do they go out? Notice I'm not asking for where. We'll get to that. But when do these first explorers go out? When do they start looking at these new paths? And then the last key question that we have is, what was so doggone important? What was so significant about the Americas? Why is our continent and our neighbor to the south, North America and South America, why were they so important to the world? Okay? So we'll address these as we go through. Again, I'm not looking for answers right now. I don't expect you to know these answers right now, but I do expect that by the end of the lecture, you will be able to answer these in significant detail. If you don't have them right now, that's okay, because you will see them again. But let's go ahead and delve into the first question, which is, why should we explore? Why did the Europeans want to go out and explore? And we find that it's actually a pretty complex answer. It's not just one thing or another, it's lots of different little parts put together, okay? The first reason that Europeans wanted to go out and explore and find new paths is that trade with the Orient was expensive. Now, Orient is an old word. It's what the Europeans would have used at the time to describe this place, but what actually was, or still is, the Orient? Does anybody know? Nobody even wants to venture a guess? We just want to sit there and be silent? Martin Luther once said, if you're going to sin, sin boldly. If you're going to be wrong, be confidently wrong. Okay? The Orient, it is, good job, but don't answer a question with a question, okay? But yes, so trade with the Orient, in parentheses, since only one of you was brave enough to guess it, so I'm going to guess that only you knew it, in parentheses above Orient, I would put Asia, so that you can be reminded of what that word means, okay? But the fact of the matter is that for Europe, trade with Asia was very expensive. There's a couple reasons for that. Number one, to get to Asia, you had to take a really long overland route. Okay? Many of you will remember this from your world geography days or your world history days in middle school, but that's called the Silk Road. Okay, it went all the way from southern Europe through the Middle East, across northern India, into China, and in some cases all the way to Japan. Well, that's a long way to go to carry goods, and so it's going to be an expensive way to carry goods. Also, for the primarily Christian Europeans, they didn't like dealing with the Muslims in the Middle East and in India. Okay? So it's an expensive route. You've got to deal with the Muslims. The Muslims are trying to make a profit. Well, of course they're trying to make a profit. They're merchants. Okay? But so the Christians didn't want to have to deal with them. And let's be honest, it was a very dangerous route as well. You've got deserts, as it says up there. There's mountains. There's snowy climates. There's bandits along the route. Okay? So it's a very expensive route, which makes it a very risky route. There's a lot that goes into it that makes things so expensive to purchase once they have traveled across the Silk Road. So one reason as to why Europeans want to go out and to find new paths to Asia, would be because things are very expensive that come from there. Another reason is that Europeans simply wanted an easier way to get those goods. Okay? Because if I have a steady supply of a product, be it fruits and vegetables, which are up there, be it gasoline, which we all have to put in our cars, be it wood so we can build houses, be it whatever, if I have a steady supply of that good, that's going to mean I can pay lower prices. And if you put yourselves into that mindset, hey, I can go to the gas station. Do I want to pay $3 for a gallon of gas? Or do I want to pay $30 for a gallon of gas? I want to pay $3 a gallon of gas, correct? So in order to have those lower prices, I need a steady supply. It's the same thing back in the late 1400s. So a steady supply of a product will lead to lower prices of that product, and that overall will lead to happier citizens. Now, happy citizens are great, and I want all of you as the citizens of my classroom to be happy, but realistically, the king or the queen, the leader, they're the ones that really want their citizens to be happy, correct? Because if you guys don't like your king, you might kill him. You might revolt. You might rebel and overthrow said ruler. Well, if I'm the king, I don't want you to be angry. I want you to be happy. So if I can get a steady supply of whatever good it is that you guys want, if I can get that steady supply, you're going to be happy. And if you're happy, I'm not dead. Right? So that's another reason that Europeans would want access to those goods. Another reason that Europeans are going to go out and explore is because there was a lot of pressure from the Catholic Church. If you want to, you can just mark out the word Catholic. Because the Catholic Church was the church. Because the Reformation had not happened yet. In what year does Martin Luther go on the cathedral? Yeah, 1517. We're talking the late 1400s, 1490s, correct? So the Catholic Church is the church. I have it up there so you realize the distinction between the two from our perspective. But the fact of the matter is that the church was putting a lot of pressure on the European leaders to find new paths to get to Asia. Primarily because money was leaving Europe. Money that the Catholic Church viewed as rightfully theirs because of tithes and offerings and things like that. Okay? So the money is leaving Europe, but where's it going? It's going to the Middle East. And it's ending up in the hands, as the Catholics would say, of the heretics, of the Muslim traders in that area. And why would the Catholic Church want its money, what it viewed to be its money, going to somebody of a different religion? That doesn't sound good to the Catholic Church, correct? So they're going to put a lot of pressure specifically on European leaders, the governments, be they kings, queens, duke, duchesses, earls, whatever you want to call them, okay? They're going to put a lot of pressure on the leaders of Europe to find a way around those Muslim traders. Maybe take a different path to get to those goods. And then another reason that we're going to go explore is because Spain, as well as a couple other countries, but primarily Spain, was broke. They couldn't afford the goods from the east. And they were broke because they had been fighting a war called La Reconquista. Okay, La Reconquista, which means the conquering, the reconquering. Okay? And Spain had been fighting this war for a while. It was a long war. Okay? If you think about some of the longest wars in American history, you know, we fought in Iraq for a long time, we fought in Afghanistan for a long time, and we spent billions upon billions upon billions of dollars fighting those wars, correct? Okay? So, if, you know, those are like 2-decade-long wars. That's a long time to be fighting a war. Okay? Spain fought La Reconquista for 700 years. From 792 all the way to 1492. They were reconquering it from the Moors, from the Muslims who had invaded and taken over the Spanish/Iberian Peninsula in 792. Now that doesn't mean that every day of every week of every month of every year for 700 years they're fighting, but they would fight for several years, take some time off. Fight for several hundred years, or for several years, take some time off. So it's a long, drawn-out, bloody process. But finally, by 1492, the Spanish had been able to successfully reconquer the Iberian Peninsula. 1492. That year sounds familiar, doesn't it? Because in 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue. Exactly. Okay? You've got to understand, maybe that year is up there for a reason. Maybe he went out that year for a reason. Maybe there's some purpose behind Spain looking to a foreign guy, because Christopher Columbus was not Spanish, and saying, hey, would you sail for us? Maybe there's some reasons behind that, okay? But again, because Spain and several others were broke, they couldn't afford those goods from the Orient, and so they had to find some way to get them. There was pressure on Spain from the Catholic Church. There's pressure on Spain from the leaders because they want their citizens to be happy. There's all this expense dealt with it. And so finally, a lot of these nations look and they say, hey, rather than going to the east, maybe we can go to the west. So rather than going overland, hey, there's a bunch of water out there. I bet if we take that water, it'll get us around the world, and so we can land in Asia. You got to remember, by 1492, most educated people in the world knew that the earth was round. This whole myth that they thought they would fall off the edge of the earth, no. People knew since the time of the Greeks that the world was round. We didn't really understand it yet, but we knew that the world was round. Okay? And so the Spanish people, the Italian people, the Portuguese people, the educated ones, they said, instead of going this way over land, let's try this way over water. Make sense to everybody? Okay, so that's some of the reasons. There's more to it than that, but that's some of the primary reasons as to why the Europeans wanted to go out and explore. So let's talk about who the major explorers were. First things first is not Christopher Columbus. The first explorers we need to talk about are the Vikings. Now, the Vikings, they did not call themselves the Vikings. They did not even call themselves the Norse. Okay? Norse is the old English way of saying what? Anybody want to venture a guess? The Norsemen? I'll give you a hint. These guys weren't from Southern Europe. They were from Northern Europe. So what do you think Norse means? Yeah, north. Okay? So the Northmen. Okay? The Norsemen, the Vikings, they were really the first people to go out and explore. And in about the year 1000 AD, they left their homes in Northern Europe. They sailed all the way to Iceland. They then sailed all the way to Greenland. And then they sailed all the way, that should say the northeast coast, I apologize, but they say all the way to the northeast coast of what would be known today as Canada. So the Northmen, the Vikings, they're really the ones who should be given credit for discovering, quote unquote, the New World, correct? The question I have for you guys is, why aren't they credited? What did they not do that later people did do? Yeah, they left. They didn't really colonize in the way that the Spanish, the Portuguese, that everybody else that comes after them that we know about, they didn't colonize in the same way. Okay? So really, the Vikings should be given credit for discovering America, but they did not. By the way, can you really discover something where people already live? Imagine you walk into your neighbor's house, uninvited, by the way, and you walk into their living room and you say, hey, I have discovered your home. There's people there, right? They knew that it was there. Did you discover it? No. But from the European perspective, again, They didn't know it was there. That's why they said, that's why we've just sort of adopted the idea of the discovery. Make sense? I'm not trying to discredit the natives or anything along those lines, so don't take it that way. But so again, the first major explorer will be the Northmen. After that becomes the people that we know. Obviously Spain, led by the efforts of Christopher Columbus. Columbus will actually make 4 voyages, okay? The first will be in 1492, the last will be in 1502, okay? And Columbus is the first guy to sail to the west, and he lands where? Where does he think, at least, he has landed? Here's a hint. What does he call the native people that he meets? Indians. Where does he think he is? India. He thinks he's in the Indies, which was another generic term for the Orient, for Asia. So everything over there was the Indies, okay? Which is why the term Indian is a lasting legacy of Christopher Columbus, okay? But he will actually die believing firmly that these Indians he was talking to were from Asia, just from maybe from an uncharted part of Asia, okay? So Christopher Columbus believes he got to Asia. He is, of course, disproven by a guy named Amerigo Vespucci, okay? Amerigo Vespucci will sail in 1499. He is not really an explorer. Instead, he is a cartographer. What's a cartographer do? You don't need to raise your hand. Yeah, they make maps, okay? So Vespucci is making a map of Central and South America, gets home, studies it, and says, this does not match up with anything in the Indies / Asia / the Orient, therefore it must be new. Which is why, in English, we would pronounce Amerigo as what? America. We've named North America and South America after Vespucci because he's the guy who discovered not necessarily the continents, but discovered that they were new continents. Okay? So Amerigo Vespucci in 1499. Again, Christopher Columbus, not Spanish. Amerigo Vespucci, not Spanish. Where were both of them from? They're from Italy. Why didn't they sail for Italy then? I'll give you a hint. There was no Italy. Italy was a disjointed bunch of little kingdoms. They were city-states. They were also on the Silk Road and become wealthy because of the trade with the Silk Road. Okay? So Italy had no real desire to go explore and find new paths, correct? But you have these really smart Italians saying, I'd like to go, I'd like to explore, I want to see what's out there. And so other nations will sponsor them. So Columbus, even though he's Italian, we call him a Spanish explorer, right? Because we go by what nation did you sail for, or what flag did you sail under. Does that make sense to us all? Okay. Up next is Portugal. Okay, Portugal is a small nation. It's on the Iberian Peninsula. It's sandwiched between Spain and the Atlantic Ocean. Okay, it used to be a really, really important nation. Now it's sort of taken a backseat in terms of world politics. It's still a nice nation. It's still, you know, whatever. It's a second-rate power. It doesn't really have that great of a military thing like that. So we tend to discount it. But back in the day, Portugal was a superpower. Okay, the first guy you need to know about is a guy named Pedro Cabral. The red on the map up there is a little bit hard to read. I understand that. I apologize. But what Pedro Cabral did was he sailed from Portugal all the way down through the Atlantic Ocean and would land in what is modern-day Brazil. Okay? He will do this in the year 1500. He will claim this territory for Portugal, which is why Brazil is the only Latin American nation to speak what language? Portuguese. Most other nations in Central America and South America speak Spanish. But because Pedro Cabral claimed that territory for Portugal, they speak Portuguese in Brazil still today. Okay? It's a little bit out of order, but that's okay. But you need to know about Vasco Núñez de Balboa. He sails between 1497 and 1498. Okay? The reason Balboa is so important is he is the first European to cross the Americas and see the Pacific Ocean from our side. The only time that Europeans had ever seen the Pacific Ocean before was from the Asian side. Now they can see it from the American side. He will cross the Isthmus of Panama, just so you are aware, where the North American continent is at its skinniest. That's where he crosses, gets to see the Pacific Ocean. He's the first person to do that. Okay? So again, from Portugal, you have Pedro Cabral and Vasco Núñez de Balboa. Next you have France. Okay, we don't really tend to think about France as a major center of exploratory power, but they were. Okay, the first guy that goes off from Spain or from France is a guy named Giovanni de Verrazzano. That is not a French name. What type of name is Giovanni? I'll give you a hint. They all talk like this, and they got the stereo. There you go. He's an Italian guy. Again, an Italian. Okay? By the way, Italy was the center of what rebirth of knowledge? What did we call that? Who remembers? The Renaissance, which is why a lot of these really important and really smart people come from Italy. They've grown up after the Renaissance. They've learned all these things. They discover, hey, the Greeks, they knew the world was round. I can go that way, right? So you have a lot of these really intelligent Italians going out for other nations, okay? But Giovanni de Verrazzano will go out and he will sail through, or sail on the east coast of North America. He does this in 1524. And then the next French guy, this is like 100% French. Oui, oui. When your name is Jacques Cartier, it doesn't get a whole lot much more French than that, does it? Okay? So Jacques Cartier, he is a Frenchman. He goes out between 1534 and 1535 and makes 2 voyages into what we would consider to be modern-day Canada. And he will claim that territory for France, which is why if you live in Quebec, in the eastern portion of Canada, you speak French Canadian. Okay? If you live in the west, you speak English. If you live in the east, you speak French. It's part of the colonial legacy of Canada. Okay? So again, from France, we don't typically think too much about exploration, but they were very important. Okay? So Verrazzano and Cartier. All right. So your pivotal events chart, the one that was passed out to you guys, go ahead and get that out. And the first thing that we're going to write down on here is in 1492, Columbus discovers America. We're all going to write it the exact same, because since we can use this on our test, I want us to have the same thing. So 1492, Columbus discovers America. The significance, it opens a new continent to exploration and settlement by Europeans. Get that written down, and once you have it written down, stand up, please. I wasn't joking. Once you're done, put your pencil down and stand up. All right, so let's go ahead and move on, and then we'll finish by talking about America's significance. You guys can go ahead and sit back down. But let's finish by talking about why America was so important. Okay, so what is the significance of America? Number one, it opens up new lands for trade. Okay, so Europe is able now to trade with new areas, huge new areas, large populations of these new areas. Okay. So we have new lands to trade in. And because of this new land, a whole lot of wealth will flow back to Europe. Now, primarily, in the beginning, for the first 100 years or so, that wealth went back to Spain. Spain was, for a span of about 100 years, the leader of exploration and colonization and wealth amongst the European powers. Okay, Spain had the most land. They settled that land very quickly, and they were able to explore and in some cases exploit that land. Okay, so a lot of money will go back to the Spanish people. And those are both nice, but the real significance, the real importance of America comes in what's known as the Columbian Exchange. Okay, and the Columbian Exchange was the transfer of ideas and goods and people from the old world to the new world. Okay, so the Columbian Exchange is the trading, the transferring, the moving of people, goods, and ideas from the old world to the New World. Now we have to answer this question then. What are the Old and New Worlds? Okay? What was the Old World? In other words, what did the people of Europe know about in the year 1492? Europe, Asia, and Africa, exactly. Okay? Well, that was to them the world. Now all of a sudden they discover something that wasn't there before. This is new. Well, if this is new, that must be old, right? So the old world is Europe, Asia, Africa. The new world is North America and South America. Okay? And so the Columbian Exchange is the moving of people, goods, and ideas between these two regions. Okay? So from the old world to the new and from the new world to the old, that movement is what's known as the Columbian Exchange. And that's the real significance behind America. Because once the Columbian Exchange starts, it never stops. Okay? It's that movement of goods, people, and ideas. All right. So this will get us back then to our key questions. Okay? So go ahead and revisit these. And I want you to take your time and write down the best possible answers that you can. Okay? Use detail. Because when you're reviewing for your tests, if you can answer these key questions, you're on the right track. Okay? So why did Europeans want, or in some cases need, to find new paths? Who were the first European explorers? When did they explore? What's so important about the Americas? So answer these questions. Then, you've got your Age of Exploration chart right there. You can start filling in some of those with the people that we've talked about today, correct? So start using these things, because again, you get to use those on your test. Start filling out that chart independently, and it'll really come in handy. All right? Rest of the time in class is yours. Answer your questions, fill out your chart, continue to work on your guided reading.